I am a deeply frustrated man today because once again, I sought out something that I thought would be a wonderful thing to talk about on this channel, and I was horrendously disappointed. And the last time that happened was with Tron Ares just a couple of videos ago, and now it's happened again. And the movie in question this time around is The Creator, which was directed by Gareth Edwards. And Gareth Edwards is a director that I've really liked. I liked Monsters, his very first movie, which was made on a microscopic budget and does not show it. I liked his take on Godzilla back in 2014. I loved Rogue One. And now he's followed all that up with The Creator. And honestly, I don't know what went wrong here because this is just not a good movie. It does have the one thing that it has going for it is atmosphere and production design. And if you want to study a movie to get an idea of how to create an atmosphere for for a science fiction setting and how it should look and how it should feel and all the texture and all of it, this is the movie to study. Especially since again, this was made for an astonishingly low budget. But the story itself is just wretched. And I was racking my brains as this thing was unfolding, asking myself, why is this just not working? The pieces are all there, but they just all keep falling flat. And so the basic idea is that first off, we get this nice compressed little bit of like newsreel type of world building crammed into the beginning of the film. We saw something a little bit like this with Pacific Rim. There have been similar attempts to do this in the Fallout universe, which, by the way, I like a great deal. And so here we have this like post World War II kind of environment where artificial intelligence was developed very rapidly, and then unfortunately it got out of hand. And one of the ways it got out of hand was that it resulted in a very short nuclear war, which blew up Los Angeles. And so now AI is banned in the West, but it has achieved a kind of a cult status, for lack of a better way to describe it, as an actual religious cult status in Southeast Asia. And this is the part of the story that gets me kind of wincing because I said to myself, I don't think they were trying to be intentionally, racist or xenophobic with any of this stuff. I think they had the best intentions, but unfortunately, because the writing of the movie is so bad and because it's just so stupidly put together, that's how it feels. Because it's just so boneheaded in the way that it unfolds. And so the main character, who's played by John David Washington, is this soldier who's theoretically out of combat. He lost an arm in the burst over Los Angeles, and now he's shacked up somewhere with this woman that he's met named Maya, and they live in this nice little cute little house on the beach, and they've got a baby on the way. And then soldiers break in and take Maya away, and then we find out in very quick succession that the reason that she's being taken away is because she is theoretically the creator of this super duper AI that could have untold consequences for the world. And her husband, Joshua, by the way, is his name, was actually a deep cover agent who was sent in to find her and bring her in. And he's heartbroken because he's actually grown very enamored of her. His love for her is real. They're going to have a child. They're going to have a future and all the rest of this. And all that's just smashed to pieces. So 5 years later, he's in a kind of druggy misery where he's doing, terrible grunt work like pulling, the corpses of burnt AIs out of cars, post-nuclear cleanup, basically. And then he's recruited by the military, one of those you go back in or else kind of things, to look for this hidden super weapon. And this is, of course, Maya's creation. She's created something that could theoretically destroy, the world, whatever. And their hook for getting him back in is they show him footage of Maya alive and well because he assumed that she was dead after all of this. And so he very reluctantly goes along. And the way that they do this is very reminiscent of, in fact, it's probably better to say it's just straight up homage leaning into ripoff of pretty much every Vietnam War movie you've ever seen, like Platoon and Apocalypse Now and all the rest of them. So he goes in with this cadre, this platoon of soldiers, and they've got this female sergeant who's barking out the orders, and they go in to look for the base where the AI is allegedly being created. And the base is itself, and there's actually now here another dual homage. They have two homages right on top of each other to Akira. One of them is the big underground vault where the great secret is, and the other is the orbiting super cannon They have this thing that's like a cross between an orbiting supercannon and a B-52 they call Nomad, which projects this. It's a really neat effect, actually. It projects this gigantic crosshair with lasers down onto whatever it's going to blow up. That stuff is great to look at. But they all remain just homages. They're just pieces. They don't feel like they actually come together to form a new story. It's like we're watching somebody anthologizing all of the cool stuff. The whole thing, you know what the whole thing feels like to me? It feels like something that Gareth Edwards wrote back when he was a teenager, and then he shelved it, and then he brought it back out, and he said, "Oh man, it would be really great now that I have some connections or whatever, I could make this into a movie." And the incredible thing is that one of the co-writers for this thing, I'm assuming somebody that he brought on to help polish it a little further, was Chris Weitz, who gave us Rogue One, a big part of the reason why that movie worked as well as it did, and quite a number of other good movies, honestly. And but you know, when we see how these pieces are being used, they're not being deployed in any way that sings as a unit. So anyway, Joshua goes into the base and he discovers the super weapon, which is in the form of an AI child. And the child has these very ill-defined powers. Basically, he puts his palms together like he's in meditation, and he can basically deactivate technology or make it do whatever he wants. And immediately I said to myself, this is just way too loosey-goosey for our own good, because it means they're just going to use this as a get-out-of-jail-free card whenever they need it. And they're going to offset that by the fact that he's a kid, and then he's like kind of giggly and doesn't really seem to know what's going on. And so, you know, it's all about him being a little bit temperamental, a little bit spacey. And I said, no, this is just not the way to do that, guys. This is just lazy. And so he ends up taking the kid on the run, and then there's this kind of, you know, sub lone wolf and cub kind of relationship between them, which is just every time they try to make it funny or poignant, whatever, it just lands as painful and annoying. And there's a lot to look at. I mean, there's not a single ungorgeous shot in this film. It's incredible how good it looks and how much thought is put in each individual frame. But the story is just unbearably lazy in its construction and in its implications. And I think the single biggest thing that bugged me was that there isn't really any attempt to engage with AI as an idea. It's just sort of a MacGuffin. It's just a piece in there, you know, to stick in it like a flag and say, oh, now it's about something important. This is something that has always bothered me when a story confuses a theme with an idea. That just because you have something in a story, that doesn't mean that the story is about that thing. It just contains it. And that's how it plays out in this movie. There's AI in there, but there isn't really any sustained attempt to think about what that means. It's just set dressing. It's just background. It's just environmental. It's not made into the substance of the story in any palpable way. And it goes on for about half an hour longer than it deserves to. There's this whole long, protracted conclusion, which just piles one stupid thing on top of another. There were multiple moments where I was sitting there going, seriously? And I said to myself, you know, if they had just taken a couple of the pieces of the things that they're trying to do and moved them back a little earlier into the story, they would have still worked there, and then we would have been saved the head-slappingly, groaningly stupid scene that we just saw. It would have been completely unnecessary. They would have just been able to go straight to whatever it is that they're trying to do. And they do this multiple times. And, you know, to the extent that there are good things in it or interesting things in it, they're fragments. You know, they're crumbs scraped off the table. They don't constitute the whole. And then there's exactly the ending that I feared, which I'm going to spoil for you, by the way. Basically, Joshua gets the kid to Nomad, the orbiting platform, and they are able to successfully destroy it, you know, at the cost of Joshua's life. The kid survives, and then there's this shot that just had me laughing uncontrollably. They have the whole orbital platform blowing up and then dropping into pieces onto the planet. I said to myself, this is creating just as much destruction as the thing was when it was dropping bombs. So you've only made things worse. So I was just like, it's just such a the word is pathetic. You know, when you're aiming for something that's supposedly profound and you just end up making the audience giggling, it just lands all wrong. There's also another thing about the movie that bothers me, which is that Joshua's character has the potential to be much more involving. The problem is that the way the film is constructed, there's a lot of awkward interlaced flashbacks um, that don't really give us any new information about the relationship that he had with Maya. Like, for instance, one of the things we learned is that Maya was creating this AI superweapon thing in secret, and that she was basically doing this behind Joshua's back. And there's never any attempt to engage with that, that dual aspect of her existence. It's not used to drive the story in any way. It's just a drop in. It's just and to me, this is the biggest problem of the movie, is that all of these things that could have been opportunities for storytelling, for actually constructing an interesting and absorbing story out of this material, are just not used. They're just ignored, or they're misused, they're mishandled in this really awkward, like, kind of throwaway sort of fashion, while the story itself concentrates on all these other things that are just recycled out of a dozen other movies, whether they're war films or just action films generally. One of my standard complaints about science fiction in movies is that a lot of the time you don't have a science fiction movie. You have an action movie with some science fiction stapled on top of it as a flimsy overleaf, as I like to say. And sometimes that can work. That was basically what the Terminator was, and the Terminator was fantastic. That was a trendsetter. But a lot of times it just turns into a dumb action movie where the things that are science fictional in the movie are not informing the way the movie thinks about itself or comes together or moves forward or any of that. And I watched about 20 minutes of The Creator before saying to myself, they're just doing the action movie with the science fiction overleaf, aren't they? But they don't think they are. They're saying to themselves, no, we're actually making a science fiction movie. Emphasis on that, on those two terms. And they weren't. They were making what amounted to a dumb action movie that had some pretenses towards being science fiction, but it wasn't. What it reminded me of, honestly, was another movie I saw some years back called Elysium, which had that's another movie that had the seeds of greatness in it that were never fully realized because they just ended up settling for the most doctrinaire, by rote action movie type of way to assemble the material and think about it. It also did that thing that I hate, which is a byproduct of this kind of thing, which is that it ends right when things are actually getting interesting. I said, wait, they've ended the story right at the moment when all of its implications, all of the really interesting implications of what's going on are just now coming out. Why? And it told me that it wasn't just a story framing problem, that it was a story problem, period. That they hadn't thought about how these things could be made into a story, but just a series of steadily developing action sequences. Now, I say all of this saying that I still have hope for Gareth Edwards. I'd still like to see what he does next. Well, I understand that his next movie after this was Jurassic World Rebirth, which I have less than no interest in. Please don't hate me. But, he's done some amazing work so far. He clearly has the potential to do great things again. He just needs to be paired with the right story. And unfortunately, that's something that I see in a lot of directors who are really good at giving us something visionary, is that they don't always have good story instincts. And sometimes what they think is a good story is not actually a good story. It's just a bunch of set pieces looking for a story. And unfortunately, that's what happened here with The Creator. Anyway, I do encourage you to check it out, just for the sake of the design and the world building. But you're going to need a Rubik's Cube sized chunk of salt to go with it, unfortunately. See what you think. And until next time, and hopefully next time I'll have something a little less dispiriting to talk about. Until next time, stay curious.